Inside that amber necklace you once wore, a soul that struggled 125 million years ago might be trapped. Scientists discovered that many insects inside amber are frozen in violent, struggling postures. They were entombed alive, watching helplessly as the golden liquid slowly engulfed them, unable to breathe, unable to scream, before being imprisoned in absolute darkness for over 100 million years. What's even more terrifying is that the mastermind behind this mass live burial was a beetle barely 2 millimeters long. It dug a pocket right on its own abdomen specifically to carry deadly fungal spores. Infecting just one tree could destroy an entire forest. And this beetle is still alive today. It might be hiding in a piece of wood in your house right now. But to understand this biochemical attack that lasted for 54 million years, we first need to figure out one question. What exactly is amber? Many people think amber is the tears of a tree. Wrong. Amber is actually a tree's band-aid. When a tree is bitten by bugs, infected by fungi, or struck by lightning, it secretes a thick, golden substance called resin. This stuff is much thicker than sap. It can seal wounds, kill bacteria, and even crush invading pests alive. But here's the catch. Not all trees can produce resin. On Earth, only conifers like pines and araucarias have this ability. And 125 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period, these conifers happened to hit their golden age, spreading all over the globe. The first condition was met, but just having resin isn't enough. Think about it. What happens when resin is exposed to the air? It either dries up and cracks in the sun, gets burned in a fire, or simply rots away. To turn resin into amber, you have to bury it underground, cut it off from oxygen, and subject it to millions of years of high heat and pressure. Only then can the resin be reborn into that crystal-clear fossil we call amber. So, the conditions for amber to form are incredibly harsh. You need a resin-producing tree, you need something to injure that tree so it bleeds profusely, and you need that blood to coincidentally get buried in sedimentary layers to be preserved. The odds of all three conditions being met simultaneously are astronomically low. Yet bizarrely, during the Cretaceous period, this impossible event happened crazily on a global scale. Scientists call this era the Cretaceous Resin Event. It started 125 million years ago and lasted for a staggering 54 million years. During this time, the Earth seemed to be covered in a layer of golden slime. From Lebanon to Myanmar, from Spain to Canada, amber deposits popped up everywhere. In Lebanon alone, scientists examined just 10 kilograms of amber and found over 8,000 ancient biological specimens. What does this number mean? It means that during that era, almost every tree was bleeding heavily. What caused the forests of the entire world to get injured at the same time? Initially, scientists suspected climate was the culprit. The Cretaceous was one of the hottest periods in Earth's history. Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were several times higher than today. And oxygen levels were also richer. High temperatures meant more hurricanes, which would snap branches and tear off tree bark. High oxygen meant more frequent wildfires. After a fire, the surviving trees would frantically secrete resin to heal their wounds. Sounds perfectly logical, right? But scientists found a fatal flaw. If climate were the only killer, the global distribution of amber should be relatively even. But that wasn't the case. The amber deposits from the Cretaceous Resin Event were mainly concentrated in the northern hemisphere and showed a bizarre, patchy distribution. What does this imply? It implies that what injured the trees wasn't just global climate change, but a more localized killer. A killer that could move fast, spread on a massive scale, and infect an entire forest at once. The killer was something alive. The paleontologists' first prime suspect was the bark beetle. You might have heard of their close relatives. They are a nightmare for forests worldwide today. One tiny beetle drills into a pine tree and a few months later, the whole forest is dead, and their ancestors were already around during the Cretaceous. Even more terrifying, one group of bark beetles evolved an appalling survival strategy. They are known as ambrosia beetles. They don't eat wood directly. Instead, they grow mushrooms inside the tree trunks. That's right, they are farmers. These beetles tunnel into the trunk, scatter fungal spores along the tunnel walls, and wait for the fungus to grow. When the mushrooms mature, they harvest them for food and to feed their larvae. To protect their farms, they even weed out other competing fungi. When it's time to move, they pack the fungal spores into a special pocket on their bodies. This pocket maintains a constant temperature and humidity, keeping the spores viable during long journeys. Upon arriving at their new home, they open the pocket, sow the seeds, and start a new farming cycle. This system is masterfully engineered, but for the trees, it's an apocalypse. The fungus carried by ambrosia beetles is one of the deadliest enemies of plants. Once infected, the fungus rapidly spreads throughout the trunk, causing the tree to wither, stop growing, and ultimately die. Facing this lethal infection, the tree's only defense is to desperately secrete resin, trying to entomb both the fungus and the beetles. Therefore, paleontologists believed these beetle farmers caused the massive 54 million year resin explosion of the Cretaceous. The case seemed closed. But 10 years ago, a shocking plot twist occurred. Scientists took a closer look at the Cretaceous amber specimens and realized an embarrassing truth. Ambrosia beetles were virtually non-existent in Cretaceous amber. If they really were the killers, why weren't they trapped at their own crime scenes? More importantly, that sophisticated fungal pocket on the ambrosia beetle didn't evolve until 54 million years ago. By that time, the Cretaceous period had long been over. This means that during the Cretaceous, ambrosia beetles hadn't even learned how to farm yet. They were innocent. So, who was the real killer? The answer came from another beetle that had been ignored for decades, the ship timber beetle. The name sounds weird because during the Age of Discovery, sailors found that the wood at the bottom of their ships was often bored through by these bugs, turning sturdy warships into rotting timber within a few years. But there were no ships in the Age of Dinosaurs. These beetles were just drilling into wood in the forests. At first, scientists thought ship timber beetles were harmless visitors. They drilled into the trunks just to lay eggs. The eggs hatched into larvae, the larvae ate the wood to grow, and the adults flew away to find the next tree. That doesn't sound too damaging to the tree, right? But scientists missed a fatal detail. When the female ship timber beetle lays her eggs, she doesn't just drop eggs, she drops something else, fungal spores. These spores are stored in a special groove on her abdomen. In 2025, the latest research from the Max Planck Institute in Germany revealed the terrifying power of this fungus. It secretes massive amounts of acetic acid, dropping the surrounding pH level down to 3.6. In this extremely acidic environment, almost all other fungi are killed off. Only it can thrive. When the larvae hatch inside the wood, they aren't actually eating the wood itself, but the fungus planted by their mother. The mother had already prepared a farm for them. This behavior is much more primitive than the later ambrosia beetles, but it is equally deadly. Moreover, scientists found that the number of ship timber beetle fossils in Cretaceous amber overwhelmingly outnumbered ambrosia beetles. They were the true invasive species that exploded during that era. The truth finally surfaced. Paleontologists had found the right murder weapon, the fungus, but arrested the wrong suspect. It wasn't the ambrosia beetle, but the ship timber beetle that was the true culprit behind the 100 million year catastrophe. They used their own bodies as transport vehicles for biochemical weapons, spreading the deadly fungus from one tree to another, from one forest to the next. And those dying trees could only use their last ounce of strength to bleed out resin, trying to fight a hopeless war. This flowing resin engulfed countless unlucky insects, lizards, and even the feathers and tails of dinosaurs. In 2016, paleontologist Li Dajing discovered a segment of a dinosaur tail inside a piece of amber from Myanmar. The tail section was only 6 centimeters long, covered in fluffy feathers, so lifelike it seemed the dinosaur had just died. Scientists named this specimen Ava. Through synchrotron X-ray analysis, researchers detected a high concentration of ferrous iron in Ava's cross-section. This is the chemical signature of hemoglobin, meaning when this tail was enveloped by resin, the blood inside hadn't fully dried yet. This dinosaur was swallowed by the resin shortly after death, or perhaps even while it was still alive. An even more stunning discovery followed. In 2023, scientists found a dinosaur feather in Spanish amber. Clinging to the feather were several beetle larvae, happily feeding. They fed on the dinosaur's feathers, helping the dinosaur clean up skin flakes and parasites. This is the oldest symbiotic relationship between dinosaurs and insects ever discovered. Amber is like a time capsule machine, perfectly preserving the world from over 100 million years ago, totally intact. And what built this machine wasn't a natural accident, but an ecological disaster orchestrated jointly by beetles and fungi. Now, let's go back to the question at the beginning. When you gaze into a piece of amber, you're not just looking at a piece of jewelry. You are looking at the ruins of an ecological war that lasted 54 million years. Every piece of amber is a scar of a tree. Every creature trapped inside is a casualty of this war. And the tiny killer that caused all this tragedy might be hiding right now in the wood at the bottom of a boat or in the beams of an old house. It doesn't know its ancestors once changed the world. It only knows how to drill into wood, drop spores, and fly to the next tree, just as they have been doing for 125 million years.